Hey bruh, I need your help. Oh, matter of fact, hold on. So, it's been a couple years since I last uploaded and I need you to help me pick a video topic, okay? You pick a hand for me? Okay, yes!
Meow, 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 meow. Meow.
Girl, who cares? I got what I wanted.
Meow.
Stay in the cat's place. You live here rent-free, by the way.
Meow.
Hell nah. Disney Princess Enchanted Journey. It's an action-adventure game you either played at some point in your life, or a game you've probably just begun learning about by clicking on this video. It was released on PlayStation 2 back on October 16, 2007, and then later released on Wii and PC November 7th that same year. As one may assume by the name, its target audience was young girls of the time and fans of Disney princesses all over. I was both the former and the latter as I grew up playing the Wii port, but many have grown to possess a greater appreciation for the game over a decade and a half later, and I still hear it brought up from time to time. Though I've seen people reminisce on their fondest memories with this game, and the game itself had gotten good reviews from what I've seen, there's one thing that truly does not make sense to me. The lack of coverage on this game. I mean, there have been plenty of long plays, walkthroughs, and live stream let's plays of the game over the past few years, and there's no shortage of those. Even semi-recently, a compilation of the cutscenes from the story. But I've yet to see anyone discuss the story behind the game, and believe me, there's indeed a story within the game that unfolds as you play it. I don't care what your nostalgia says. I actually never finished the game as a kid, so I did it just so I could make this video without spoiling myself. That being said, I will be spoiling parts of the story, as this is a complete coverage of everything I know about the story, any prevalent lore or speculation, and whatever I feel is truly worth including in this video. I'm also not a serious critic. I'm letting you know now, this will be a mostly lighthearted recap of the game when played in natural order, as opposed to a serious critical analysis or historical deep dive. I am not interested in doing content like that, at least not covering a game like this. So if you care about spoilers for a game that came out in 2007 just like I did, go ahead and log off for me, finish the game, and then come back to this video. Otherwise, without further ado, let's get into it. We start with a little cutscene once we boot up the game, a nicely animated one at that, okay, come on Disney, budget! But to summarize, we're introduced to a little girl. She's dressed in a hooded cloak, playing in the forest, and a pixie shows up and basically lures her to an abandoned castle in the distance. Huh. And the castle, according to the story, used to be the home of a young princess until one day, an evil curse was cast upon it. The key to release the curse was for a special girl to go on an enchanted journey, and help other princesses in need until the spell was broken. Only then would the castle return to its beautiful former glory. The animated cutscene at the start is pretty straightforward and gets us started with the story in a pretty digestible manner, so that's where we first get looped in. But after the little girl goes past the huge double doors and the intro ends, we transition into another separate in-game cutscene that introduces us to the young girl herself, the very one we will now be playing as. Yippee! The game starts in a castle bedroom, and as you, the little girl, mention how beautiful the room is, you then hear the pixie ask you if you remember this room, to which you respond,
I don't think so.
You're then asked if you remember your name, which firstly acts as the opportunity to name your character, but also, we begin to see a little foreshadowing, starting within the lore that revolves around some kind of memory loss, so put a pin in that for later. Anyways, after typing your name, or struggling to type if you used a Wii remote like I did, the pixie expresses relief because you remembered your name, but I can't even lie though. I was seeing this from her perspective, I would be worried and confused too, cause damn, I just brought you here to help, and now you're telling me you got amnesia? But the part after that little tidbit is what really gets me. The pixie goes,
Now, do you remember what you used to look like?
and girl, huh? Okay, for real, let's unpack that for a second. The used to look like part is one thing we're gonna save for later, because that's a bit more loaded, but remember? how do you not remember? Was she just playing in the forest, or did she live in the forest too? No mirrors? No reflections? Even in the water? Like, respectfully, how the f do you forget what you look like? Or I guess looked like. Whatever. She's like 8 years old. It's not like she lived long enough to forget what she looked like at any point beyond toddlerhood. So yeah, I don't know why, but that's killing me. Going back to the mirror thing, we now get to follow the pixie to a mirror in the room and customize the girl's appearance. Ooh, I love character customization. Once you go over to it, you get a chance to change the dress color and style, the skin tone and hairstyle, the shoes and accessories, and not too much else can be customized beyond those things. I will say that even though it's definitely the bare minimum, it's not necessarily bad. I like the range of skin tones available because I feel like a lot of the games I liked back then didn't let me be black. Shit, who said that? So this was definitely nice at a time before it was a bit more standard. After you've dressed yourself to the nines, the pixie lets you know about the autosave feature the game has, and then gives you a magic wand. You now have the opportunity to leave the room and check out the castle as you head to the throne room, where you will practice using your new wand. Once you've reached the next room, the pixie starts to teach you about the main antagonistic forces you must face within the game. The bogs. Note how she says,
They look pretty harmless.
but I would never let any of those devious ankle biters near my drink. No wonder they're responsible for everything that's gone wrong in that castle. Like, it's no surprise to me at all. But the pixie also reveals here that the bogs are basically butterflies trapped by a curse and transformed into mindless evil minions programmed to cause mischief. So with your newly granted wand, you now have the magical abilities needed to set them free. So this is the part where you're given an opportunity to learn the wand mechanics, but I'm goated and didn't need it, so I passed on that. No footage, my fault. But beyond the actual tutorial details and things, I know what you're actually here for. You're here for the story. And once you learn the controls and follow those gems up the throne room stairs, you'll find yourself in this old and dusty room, her words, not mine, described as the forbidden area of the castle where its greatest secrets lie. The pixie invites you to use your wand and try and activate the control panel in the center of the room. And just like that, girl, wait, why is the floor collapsing? Hey, but she ain't even phased for real. Look at her. Like, the ceiling is literally crumbling and raining down on them. Like, I fear I could never be that nonchalant in that kind of situation. But now we're in some kind of secret basement compartment of the castle with these magical portals all around us, and these act as the gateways into each of the princess's worlds. Your task and the main premise of the game is to travel through each of these worlds and help stop the chaos of the bogs. Every mainline world has 3 chapters to complete before the whole kingdom or world is saved. So you'll find later that there will be multiple storylines or conflicts you explore in each one. Also, is this a safe space? It is. Okay, so when I was younger, I think around 5 years old at the time of playing this game, I had the worst time trying to get my character through these portals. Like, I was terrified, irrationally so. I couldn't do it initially because the sound combined with the vibration of the Wii remote used to scare the absolute shit out of me. I genuinely didn't get past it until after I turned 6, and that's when I actually got to play the game. It was silly, it was stupid, but it might also be my first original experience, so I mean, that's something. And don't nobody go in them comments saying they relate. I want to feel special. I want to be special. Let me do that for once. Let me have something. Anyways, at this point in the story, you're now able to enter Ariel's world, where you are transported into a new scene, onto a pier by a ship, and introduced to the first conflict you'll be tasked to resolve.
Oh, what is wrong? My tambourine won't play any sound.
Yeah, none of these instruments work anymore.
Those nasty bog creatures put a spell on our musical instruments. Oh, what are we going to do?
Quick question. How do they know they're called bogs? Like, has this happened before? Matter of fact, how would anyone know? Like, did the bogs show up one day and go,
We are the bogs.
and then start fucking the city up? I have zero clue, but I wish I knew. Regardless, the sailors can't hear their instruments, and something must be done to undo the curse for them to be able to play music again. So the pixie prompts you to use your magic wand, and you're able to restore the sounds of their instruments in no time. As the sailors finally begin to play their song, the camera pans over to none other than Ariel. Now, given the opportunity to explore the map, you are able to walk along the dock and meet her for yourself. She introduces herself and expresses how happy she is that you helped the sailors get their music back, which is the reason she came up to the surface. She reveals here that it wasn't just the sailors and all of the music is gone from her kingdom underwater. Ariel asks for your help, and while you express your concern about being able to, survive underwater, it's made known that the magic you now harness will allow you to breathe underwater. Bro, how cool is that? You then grant yourself that ability and dive in to follow Ariel to her secret cave. On the way there, you'll find various opportunities to grant the mer people their voices back. And you'll also find— Boy, what the hell, boy? God damn, that forehead booming! Her face is killing me. The lips? Please,
Okay, so I'm gonna censor her when I edit this because I kept blocking her face with my hand in front of the screen while I'm playing the game, and I can't work like this. I can't work like this. Like, there's no other way.
Okay, so now that we've addressed the elephant, the octopus in the room, there she is trying to get her some Sebastian action, flirting and getting all touchy and shit. Like, girl, keep those tentacles to yourself. You're brought into a minigame where your goal is to free Sebastian from her, and each time you hit the button right under the tentacle, Sebastian gets his lick back. Meek, you do it enough times, fill the bar, and he is finally able to speak with you. As he expresses the same concerns Ariel did, you invite him to join you both in getting to the bottom of everything. So join you he does. Eventually you reach the grotto, or Ariel's cave, and she begins to express to you the gravity of the situation when— oh shit, they found y'all! But yeah, the cave's getting shaken like a magnitude 8 earthquake, and Ariel's treasure collection is in danger, so you and Sebastian are to help catch the falling items and collect them. I swear, they just can't catch a break, and the game just started. Like, this is chapter 1 of the first world. Be so serious. Or it was chapter 1, because after that minigame it ends. That's the chapter. Damn. The second chapter does pick up right where they left off though, but then you hear this agitating, grating voice.
Help! Ariel! We need your help!
Now, he's just a baby. I won't joan on him too hard, but he explains how his whole music class is on a field trip with Sebastian and they all got separated. And I'm gonna say what we're all thinking. Was he not just here, like, just seconds ago? I mean, the more I think about it, maybe he was already on the trip with the class and got separated around the time we found him with forehead booming. But it's funnier to think that he's actively avoiding the kids because no way Sebastian headed out right before one of his students came running up in there all unattended. That would be diabolical in theory, but truthfully, I don't have time to break that apart any further. Anyways, he says if they don't get back to the coral as a group, shit would go left. Well, actually, he said something bad could happen, but I like to lie about stupid things, so for all we know, that's exactly what he said. Ariel has a curfew to stick to, so you take up the task of helping the student crabs so that she can get home on time and avoid conflict with her daddy. Now you make your way out of the coral reefs, and it turns out Sebastian was just outside this whole time. So, yeah. Okay, but you're now faced with the dilemma of getting the student crabs to safety in the coral. As the bogs show face in the distance in all of their hideous glory, you're prompted to use your magic to guide the crabs, and once you save them all, you get thanks from Sebastian and meet Forehead Boomin' Jr. Flounder. So he's come here to urgently ask for help because those nasty, conniving, ankle-biting bogs are now planning to toss the stolen voices of the mer people into some bottomless abyss? Just evil, bruh! The voices were captured into these orb things, and now, similar to the treasure cave minigame from earlier, you're tasked with catching the falling orbs with the basket Flounder is carrying as they drop from the cliff. Once you catch enough of them, you'll find afterwards that within the collected orbs lies a conch shell. Ariel comes around the corner, which I'm unsure why she had to go home by a certain time just to pop back out that bitch in the next half hour, but anyways. Once asked about it, she says it belongs to her father, and she doesn't know how it got there. You theorize that the bogs took it, but you're unsure why. So, the next step is to find out why they stole the oh, that was chapter 2 right there. But chapter 3, the final chapter, brings us back into Ariel's treasure cave where Ariel reveals that she figured out the bog's intention for stealing the shell. Apparently, they stole the sound that belongs inside of it, and that conch shell controls the music of the entire ocean. Oh lord have mercy. Flounder asks how they're going to get the sound back, and Ariel says that they can put new sound inside of it, which prompts them to turn to Sebastian, who at this time is preparing for a big concert at the lagoon. Perfect opportunity right there. Bravo. But you make your way to the lagoon through the coral reef, restoring voices and beating bog ass on the way there if you so choose, and eventually climb out of the water once there. You go to see Sebastian, show him the shell, and find that to restore the sound in it, he needs to play beautiful music for it. To it, into it, however that's supposed to work, I don't know. But first, you must tune his choir, comprised of ducks, frogs, and turtles. And I never forgot, them turtles were getting into it for real. Once everyone is in tune, you also get to help him guide the singers. It's a Simon Says style minigame, and once you play 5 different patterns back correctly, Sebastian goes on this tangent about how amazing the concert was and something about putting all your heart into it. But it's funny because that shit didn't even remotely sound listenable. To each their own, I guess. Ariel thanks you for your help, and the pixie tells you it's time to go, as you have plenty more to do on the journey ahead of you. Chapter 3 here was a short and sweet nothing burger, but a necessary ending to Ariel's dilemma. So we must travel onward to deal with even more bog-induced bullshit and continue saving the world. Worlds. Plural, yeah. Once back at your new base, Ariel's symbol lights up on your pendant and upon the floor of the room, indicating that her world was saved. The next world in order of increasing difficulty is Jasmine's, and I find it odd that they didn't line the portals up in order of difficulty, because where was the rhyme or reason when placing each one? Especially if the pixie emphasized earlier that some worlds are tougher than others. Did that mean nothing in the grand scheme of things? If someone knows why these are in the order they're in, please let me know in the comments. Thanks. But anyways, chapter 1 brings us to a new scene in Agrabah because Princess Jasmine, and we are immediately tossed into the beef of these two very paranoid dudes arguing over who the treasure next to them belongs to. Not gonna lie, the one standing closer to it seems so much more chalant than the other guy because he's just carrying on about how he knows homeboy is trying to steal it from him, and then all dude can say in response is, "I saw it first, it's mine." It's giving finders keepers, losers weepers. So you spawn right in the midst of the beef, and the pixie spells the situation right out for you. The people in this world don't trust each other, and it's largely the result of mirage treasures being placed all over. The mirage treasures in question are typically just things like piles of dirt, buckets of fish, and nothing actually worth anything to that scale, but visually cloaked as riches and gold. And with your magic wand, you have the power to break the illusion and unveil the true form of those fake treasures, so that people can regain their trust in one another. With that established, you use your magic on the card of gold to then reveal that it was not gold, and in fact, a pile of dirt. How about that, bruh? The guy who is on his way to psychosis has a moment of clarity and goes on about how he can't believe he was blinded by the treasure and forgot that was his homie, and his homie is like, yeah, type shit, thank you. So similar to what you did in chapter 1 of Ariel's world, you are to go to the palace and meet with Princess Jasmine with the ability to uncloak some mirage treasures on the way there. As you enter the palace, you find Jasmine sitting by a fountain, and y'all, why does she say she didn't hear you come in? It just occurred to me that folks could just stroll on up in there and nobody would be there to stop them. No receptionist, security, high fences, locked gates, none of that. All these years later, I am just realizing how crazy that actually is. Like, their crime rate gotta be below 0 to even justify that. But moving on. Jasmine explains the mirage situation as we have established it prior, and worries about the conflicts happening all over Agrabah over these mirage treasures. I personally feel like she can't be that worried if her palace is open like that with nothing to filter out the crazy niggas and nobody to protect her from anything going on ever. This might bother me more than I'd like to admit, but you don't gotta tell me that, I already know. You offer to help get this problem under control, and Jasmine tells you that her little friend Abu could help. Abu, my goat! But apparently, you'll have to find him first, because he's likely in the marketplace acting up. You oblige and go off to search for him. The transition cutscene back into the kingdom shows Abu running off to go be bad somewhere, and you must follow his tracks and catch up to him. You soon make it to the bazaar and continue along the path and find him stealing some bullshit gem from a local business and booking it, which is so crazy, bro. Please, this isn't you. Given the nature of the item he stole and the pixie spelling it out for you seconds later, we can assume that it's obviously not a real gem. And our job is to find him, catch him, and get him to return it. The pixie mentions how he loves fruit, so the best places to check would be the fruit stands around the bazaar. Once found, you can't catch him immediately, and he will take off with the gem in hand. You have to find him 4 different times, and on that 4th attempt, you're finally able to demand the return of the gem and preach about, the importance of integrity, while he stands there mugging with a hand on his hip. And then out of nowhere, you use your magic to unveil that the gem was quite literally nothing. Not even a pebble or something, like, oh, okay. Now enlightened by the truth, Abu returns with you back to the palace to reconvene with Jasmine. But now, there's something mad fishy happening. Jasmine has a mirage Abu, in quotes, standing beside her. But I need y'all to just watch this clip real quick because yo.
You're back. Oh, and you have Abu? But Abu is already here with me. Oh no, which one is the real Abu? I'm certainly confused.
The way I felt all the way out, dog. Abu said, I know you fucking lying. Heard that sound come out of that thing's mouth and still got the nerve to ask which one is the real Abu. Be so for real. Obviously, magic uncovers that the Abu, in quotes, next to Jasmine was actually just a goose. Jasmine thanks you for finding him and indirectly tells him to go sit his ass down somewhere. Even after all of this, the overarching problem of mirages in Agrabah remains, and Chapter 1 comes to an end. Chapter 2 picks up from the palace, and Jasmine reveals that the mirage treasures that have been plaguing the land might be coming from the Cave of Wonders, and Abu knows the way, so she wants you to follow him to the source and get to the bottom of it all. Of course, you're thrilled to help and meet with Abu outside of the desert gate. Once you've partnered up with him, it is established that Abu gets easily distracted by treasures. Twin. And you must unveil the mirages along the way to the cave to keep him on task. The A in ADHD is for Abu, by the way. That cave in the distance is what I imagine cave divers see last before they enter some shit called like Satan's GI tract and never return home to their families. You and Abu enter the cave, and the cutscene here reveals how those nasty ass bogs have been stealing the treasure in the cave, which somehow influences the structural integrity of the cave. I don't know, man. I'm just gonna hope it makes more sense as we go along. But your next task is to beat more bog ass and then return the stolen treasures with the huge stake of preventing the cave from collapsing in on itself. God damn! Nothing a bunch of magical licks and lashings can't fix though. As soon as they're out of the way, Abu tells you about a magic lamp in the back of the cave, and in order to get to it, you're gonna have to play a game of red light, green light. No Squid Game. And if I'm being honest, I have zero clue where this lamp plays a role in the mission at hand yet, but it's like necessary to move the story along, so whatever. When you win that game and successfully sneak up to the lamp, Chapter 2 ends as you pick it up and get ready to return it to Jasmine. And Chapter 3 opens up to us immediately learning that the lamp from the Cave of Wonders was a mirage. We did all that for what? The real one was actually taken away by genie bogs, and oh my god, they got multiple bog breeds? Like, as a certified bog hater, this gotta be the worst news of my life. Jasmine needs help getting these geese back into their pen before she can go looking for the real lamp. And this becomes the first minigame we play in Chapter 3. Get the geese to safety, and just like that, this trifecta of genie bogs spawn in out of nowhere. We cannot catch a break, but I'll tell you what, they made our job good and easy. Because you now get a chance to end some more bog bloodlines, and these bogs spawn mirage bogs that can also harm you, so you gotta be on it because it can get crowded and ugly real quick if you're not on your A game. But each Genie Beanie Mighty Mo drops a lamp, and after you've collected all 3, Abu waltzes over talking about some hello, like he wasn't 7 feet away from everything that just popped off. But honestly, I can't blame him, because if I didn't have a magic wand and a motive, I would've kept my distance too. Jasmine asks him if he had seen those lamps before, and he reiterates that those lamps were originally in the Cave of Wonders, and it is now your task to put them back where they belong. So you, her, and Abu all trek over to the cave in hopes that it will restore trust and peace within the land and community of Agrabah. On that note though, has anyone else ever thought about how funny it is that when the Bog stole those original lamps, they replaced it with that single mirage one? Like, they couldn't even make 3 mirages. Did they not give a fuck that bad? That one lousy ass lamp really did the trick for them. They didn't even bother to make it look convincing. As you ponder the next steps, Jasmine suggests placing the lamps on the pedestals where they most likely belong. Abu wants to help and you trust him to do so, but insists that you must have a hand in the process because we already know what timing he be on. Okay, and I know I've been making several comments like this. Yes, he does act bad as hell, but he's also cute with a charming personality, so I can't really stay mad at him for any of the things he's done because he is more than his actions alone, okay? He's like a 4-year-old nephew who only acts like that when his parents are home, and I can't fault him for that. So now that I've established that, I don't want to hear anybody watching this to think I'm an Abu hater for some reason. I love him. Thanks. Moving on. Y'all gotta work together to match each lamp to the pedestal of its same color. A simple and quick task, nothing too extravagant. And I guess somehow, the authentic lamps being back in their true places has cast out the dark magic and miraculously solved the mirage problem, effectively restoring Agrabah to his former glory and saving Jasmine's world. It's hard to imagine how exactly this worked because it's not like they actually showed anything changing or going back to normal. Like, Jasmine just straight up tells you that everything is fixed now and you're just expected to roll with it, even though nobody saw anything, not even her, because she's been in this cave with y'all the whole time. But anyways, I'm done. We're done. Chapter 3 over. We gotta keep it pushing. You're probably getting to know the drill by now already. The pendant lights up along with Jasmine's symbol on the floor. And next up, in terms of difficulty, is Cinderella. Begin with chapter 1 and you'll see the establishing shot of a clock tower being manipulated and paused by those disgusting bogs' dark magic. And once you're able to see the town that rests underneath it, just like that, bogs spawn in and immediately begin to manually freeze the people and animals who inhabit it, as if stopping time itself wasn't cruel enough. Absolutely foul. But wouldn't you know it, you possess the power and ability to unfreeze time. So you first use your magic to unfreeze poor Jack and Gus, Cinderella's little rodent companions, and find out that the bogs had frozen them before they could help deliver Cinderella's wedding invitations. Yes, Cinderella is to get married in this timeline, so that acts as the basis on which this story starts. You offer to help deliver the invitations and place them into the mailboxes around town. It's at this point where you're also able to unfreeze the animals and townsfolk who are frozen in place by the bog's time curse. And once you're done with that, you must head to Cinderella's castle, protecting Jack and Gus from the bogs along the way. I think what really sets the tone for the clear shift in difficulty for Cinderella's world is the fact that when you finally reach the gate, a couple more bogs literally spawn out of nowhere just to seal it shut with their nasty green magic. But even with that, it's as simple as murking each one and using your magic to shrink the remaining vines and undo the magic. Don't sweat it. Get that done, go inside, and you'll finally meet Cinderella and get the gist of what's been going on. She recounts how ever since the bogs appeared in the kingdom, time has been acting strangely and says if it can't be fixed, she'll have to postpone her wedding? And man, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like she's real for that, because she isn't! You mean to tell me time is frozen all around you? People and animals are frozen. There's dark, evil magic affecting everything everywhere, and your main concern is a wedding? Girl, forget about your aggressively average man for just 1 second. There are far more important things to worry about right now. And the wedding is the only reason she cares about this farmer who lives in the town. She's not concerned about him because, and these are her words, no one's seen or heard from him in quite some time. Nope, she's concerned because he was supposed to deliver food for the wedding. And that would just ruin everything. Oh my, bitch, focus. But with that addressed and aside, you offer to go to his farm and check on him, fighting bogs and heading through the forest in order to get there. I'd also like to point out an interesting little detail here, because outside of the gate, you'll see this NPC, and if you interact with him, he tells you his brother had gone into the forest but hasn't returned back to the town since. And at first, I assumed that that was the farmer's brother or something saying that, but it turns out his brother is a separate minor NPC who you'll find frozen in the forest while holding an axe. And I can only assume he was chopping some wood before the bogs came to ruin his bag, but nevertheless, you save him and continue running to the farm. Once you make it to the farm though, you'll see that the bogs are fucking up the farmer's pumpkin patch, and old dude is not having it. When I tell you these bogs are a bunch of pump menaces, bro, like why are we enlarging the pumpkins in this guy's patch until they quite literally blow up? What purpose does this serve exactly? No matter their intent, you must clear the bogs out of the pumpkin patch and make sure you shrink any sized up pumpkins before they explode. This minigame quite literally felt like it took me an hour to finish, but when it was done, thank God. The farmer thanks you for saving his crops and tells you he can finally deliver that wedding food to Cinderella. And I will say that as annoying as this plotline is to me, he deserves to make that coin, I guess. Though continuing with chapter 2 brings you into a quick opening scene where we see Jack and Gus chatting, and once you spawn in and go downstairs, you're able to interact with them and hear about what's going on. Apparently, Cinderella left the castle to search for her fairy godmother at some manor past the forest, but had been gone for far too long. You're asked to go check on Cinderella at the manor and bring Gus along with you, as he can unlock the gate for you to be able to get in. Gus is scared of the forest, and you reassure him that he will be okay and tell him to meet you at the entrance of the forest. In the interim, you get to run through the town on the way, and as a kid, I hated Cinderella's world because they do not get shy about throwing a bunch of bogs in your face the minute you bend the corner. I used to get so irrationally upset and scared, like I was getting jumped and couldn't fight back. But that was then, and they don't scare me like that no more. I'm grown now, and I know better, so this time around, I used my wand like a concealed carry and kept it moving because I was on a mission. That being said, it is immediately apparent why they consider this world to be a step up in terms of difficulty, because it is noticeably more challenging than the ones we talked about prior. Somewhere further along the way, there's a brand new breed of bog that spawns in looking like a grandfather clock mixed with 4 booming, and when you murk it, it'll do the butterfly thing and then turn into a normal, not evil grandfather clock and fade away. Okay, sure. As you reach the entrance of the forest, you'll find poor little Gus cowering in fear, terrified of the bogs, and rightfully so. Look how small he is! But it is our responsibility to guard him on the way to the manor. So if that means sliming out even more bogs, then that's what the f we're gonna do. I don't know if y'all can tell, but I don't play about him. The thing I realized about those ugly grandfather bogs is that if you end up getting attacked by one, their nasty ass green aura isn't as harmless as the typical bogs. You get caught lacking once, and they can hit you with a huge blast that temporarily slows time and leaves that gross foggy overlay on the screen until the effect wears off. Personally, I had a great deal of challenge trying to get through this task when I played, at least compared to Ariel and Jasmine's stories respectively, where the minigames there were much easier to grind through, at least now as an adult. You really have to focus and strategize from this point onwards, because yes, this is a game geared for little girls, and yeah, sure, they held your hand to get you acclimated to the game mechanics, but I realized all these years later, they do not baby you forever. You may not be able to die in this game, but I'd argue that in this case, being stuck on the same task and not being able to progress through the chapter otherwise is a fate worse than death. It's the video game equivalent of a child being forced to sit at the dinner table until they finish every last bit of food on their plate. And if you can't do that, you don't get to taste that sweet dessert. Which is why I locked in enough to get to the gate. God bless. I never want to have to do this again. And I don't know how I got past this point as a kid without shitting my pants. As you approach the manor, Gus unlocks the gate and you both go your separate ways for the moment as you enter the manor. Upon entry, you are greeted with the horrible sight of a literal bog drive-by actively taking place before your very eyes. As they cast dark magic upon Cinderella, her body now frozen in time, and they flee the scene immediately after. I just know my blood pressure was high seeing this shit at the age of 6. I can tell I would have been seething, bro. Like, what do you mean I gotta run up in here and be met with the lifeless body of a princess turned mannequin coated in the body odor of the Flying Dutchman? Oh shit, right, we have a magic wand. We can free our girl right now today. As you would imagine, Cinderella is confused as to what just happened, but she very quickly realizes that you saved her. Upon asking how you knew to find her here, which is a valid question, you tell her that Jack and Gus sent you and that they were worried about her being gone for that unusually long time. Cinderella explains that the bog stopped her before she could find her fairy godmother, but she might be out by the wishing well outside of the kitchen. There's just one small issue though, as the kitchen door was sealed with dark magic, and you can kind of see here that the magic seal doesn't really look like the usual funky, moldy halitosis aura we've been seeing up to this point. And it begins to make sense why, as Cinderella theorizes that it has something to do with the clocks in the manor. Using the clock by the kitchen as an example, which is the only one set correctly, you are now sent off to fix the other 3 clocks throughout the manor. See, this game isn't that hard as an adult who can both read analog clocks and replicate the patterns in the hands of the clock, which I consider the former an advantage because when I was 6 and asked to tell the time on an analog clock, I could not have told you shit about fart. I also heavily overthought it back then because this time I quickly realized both hands are always going to be pointing at 12, and as a kid I didn't use the context clues necessary to figure that it was midnight. You know, like the actual Cinderella story? At that time, all I could base it on was matching the positions of the short hand and the long hand to the ones on the correct clock, and that alone, you know, helped me get by. I mean, barely, but it did. Also, that sound I used to hear when I set the time wrong would scare the dookie out of me for real. Cinderella's clock theory proved to be true, and the magical seal on the kitchen door is broken. But after you've gone through the kitchen and made it outside to the well, you run into the thieving bogs, trying to steal coins out the wishing well as if life is sweet. And as you might have quickly deduced, you gotta turn their sweet lives into shortened lives, and then return the stolen coins to the well, as each coin represents a wish someone has made. And if you don't, you're probably gonna be the reason someone's horse and carriage get repossessed tomorrow. I don't think you want that sitting on your conscience, man. Once you've recovered all the coins, Cinderella's fairy godmother materializes before you, and upon Cinderella introducing you both, the issue in this world is explicitly mentioned for I think only a second time this far, and we've already been through all of chapter 1 and 2 at this point, but it was also made apparent by the horrors that took place before we could get to this point, so I can't even say I didn't see it coming. But the trouble here is in plain sight, as time is being frozen all throughout the kingdom. And as chapter 2 closes out here, you hear the fairy godmother express her desire to get to the bottom of it all. Chapter 3 brings us back in at the inside of the clock tower, where you go to meet with her and find out what might be causing all of the drama. You then learn that she found 3 cogs missing from this clock, and without the lost cogs, the clock not only doesn't work, but also freezes time in the kingdom. So you must go back to the manor and ask Cinderella about the cogs so that you can recover them, fix the clock, and unfreeze time. Sounds simple when I lay it out like that, but I knew better considering I had low-key been fighting for my life up to this point. I knew it was only downhill from here, and for this just being the introduction to chapter 3, I did not have high hopes of this being a cakewalk. And honestly, in retrospect, I am so glad I didn't though, because the minute I turned my ass around to leave, I immediately got met with 3 hating ass bogs, and 2 of them were Grandpa booming. I can't catch a break, bro. They just kept spawning every few feet on my way out. I had to pause the game multiple times and collect myself for a moment. Like, zero reason a grown nigga should be stressing like this, playing a Disney princess game on the Wii, but I don't care. I'm doing it for my younger self more than anything. Anywho, you enter the town and continue to deal with the onslaught of bog violence as you head back through the forest and to the manor to go see Cinderella. Once you arrive, you relay to her the information her fairy godmother gave you at the clock tower and proceed to ask her if she has any clue about the cogs and where they might be. She then brings up the attic of the manor and suggests you might have some luck finding them there. As you make your way up and around, Cinderella gives objectively helpful hints about different locations you might want to check, like behind the stairs for instance. Each of the cogs in the manor would be found in distinctly larger treasure chests you can interact with the same way you would with NPCs. And after you find the first 2, your little pixie guide suggests going back to the farm, as you could find something there too. And also, take a wild guess of who the upstanding gents that escort you out are. Here's a hint. Forehead! Soon as you're outside and back at the forest, here go Farmer Brown back again and crying for help because the bogs are apparently stealing the pears from his pear trees. At first I wanted to clown on the old guy because he's too grown to be acting like this over pumpkins and now some pears, but as a professional bog op, I realized it was justified for him to feel like that because not only had he been through a lot of stress back in chapter 1 already, but why would they need to steal a poor farmer's pears of all things? Like, what if it was a recession going on? What if you can't put food on the table because the bogs are petty and greedy and just doing shit to do it? I don't know, man. It's just cruel and unusual at this point, and I couldn't care less what you think. That being said, you go follow him to the farm, and once you see that Jack and Gus are there to help, you also see the basket sitting behind him. You know what minigame was reskinned for this next part, unless you just started watching this video from this point onward, and in that case, let me help you out. Move the basket. Watch the motion from above. Catch the falling pears from the tree. Wow, I'm truly thrilled to have to play this minigame yet another time. Nigga, I feel so jolly right now. Yeah, it's nothing new, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't struggle with this one a little bit. It was specifically towards the end when multiple pairs started spawning in, but they all fall at different times in different orders that are very hard to keep up with. I let so many just drop to the fucking ground before I finally caught enough in the basket to win and move on. But I owe my victory to the fact that missing pairs didn't deduct any progress. Thank you, Lord! Once you knock that out, the farmer offers you a cog he just so happens to have lying around because he doesn't know what else to repay you with, and of course, you accept that third and final cog. It's now time to head back to the clock tower. You run back through the forest and city, slaughtering bogs like a desensitized war criminal, and soon you make it back to the clock tower, replace the cogs where they belong, and see the gears in the clock begin to turn again. Time is restored, everyone cheers, and Cinderella thanks you for your hard work as you make your departure at last. Also, you know my smile faded when she mentioned that f***ing wedding again one last time. Don't piss me off. Pendant glow, floor glow, bloom. We're gonna check out Snow White's world now. Revisiting chapter 1 after all these years felt surreal because I knew this was the point in the game where my child self straight up quit. Like, I don't know if it was the first chapter specifically, but there was definitely some point in Snow White's story where I couldn't do it no more. Skill issue, I guess, but I'm sure other 6-year-olds would have had no problems at this point in the game. The issue in this universe is right in front of our faces apparently, as all of the colors have been evaporated from the land. At least almost everything besides the greenery you can see like right in front of you. And here your magic wand has the ability to control color, which I genuinely thought was a really cool mechanic to introduce. The land is but an unpainted canvas to you, young dreamer. You have the 3 color choices of red, green, and blue. And just based on observation of the surrounding land, you could probably infer that you'll be using those colored magical circles on the ground as a touch point to change your wand's color and use it to restore the appropriate hue to turn colorless objects, creatures, and the like back to normal. You obtain one of the colors by twirling within its circle and bring back color by casting it onto the subject with your magic wand. Whenever you twirl in a different colored circle, you get a new color to work with. By the gate, you meet Dopey, who's locked outside of it because a bog uses magic on the lock. Typical. But hey, nothing magic can't fix. Dopey proceeds through the path and invites you to follow him past the gate. You then reach the cottage where it's much more visually clear what objects have been drained of their color, from the cottage itself to the clothes on the clothesline, buckets and barrels, you name it. But you head inside and Dopey brings you to Snow White, who explains what's been going on in her world with the bogs stealing color from all over the place. You offer to help with your magic and all 3 of you head back outside. I honestly wasn't sure how the color changing part of this story was going to function on a technical level, considering the kind of game this is, and I couldn't remember how complicated it actually was for me back when I was younger, but it was actually done in a pretty good way from what I've experienced. You only really work with one color at a time, and rather than constantly switching between colors to paint several different things in one go, you're really only doing things like painting the red objects red first and then the blue ones later and, you know, the green ones after that. Snow White also clarifies which objects should be what color, which helps to better understand how to do it correctly. I do appreciate them doing it this way, and it probably eliminates unnecessary stress and challenge considering the point of the game we're at. However, I will say that even with the last part I mentioned about Snow White clarifying which color goes where, you do really have to pay attention to what objects she mentions for each color, because even with one color assignment at a time, you can see like all of the blank objects at once, regardless of their needed color, and you can paint things the wrong color if you aren't careful. You don't really suffer an actual consequence if you do this, because they always revert back to blank within seconds, but you do hear that same god-awful sound you'd hear when you set the clocks wrong in Cinderella's castle, so pick your battles wisely. After you've restored all the green, the cottage magically transforms back to its original colors, but even with that problem solved, Snow White mentions how she's a little bit worried about her friends over at the mine who've been having trouble with their tasks ever since the bogs began terrorizing this world. Cinderella should take notes from her, because I swear she mentioned that damn wedding more times than she expressed worry about literally anyone. But I digress. You're sent to go check on the dwarves and fight the bogs off as you follow the path to the mine. You eventually reach the mountains, and real quick, what is up with this nigga Ford, bro? He definitely about to throw his back out if he hasn't already. I'm no expert on mining, but that just can't be right. Come on, Slim. Following the path to the mine is pretty straightforward, and you can also restore color to more objects around the map along the way. But once you reach the mine, you're greeted by a visibly perked up dwarf, happy to be exact, who tells you to excuse his manners as he and his friends had a disagreement just now. Bro is so geeked by default, you can't even tell. Heading inside of the mine leads you to the other dwarves, and here you'll meet Doc and Grumpy. Both Dopey and Happy are here as well, and they're all trying to mine some gems but are having trouble working together, which, you know, isn't new information. I thought he would tell us why that was, because like even earlier, we were never told a reason, but I guess we've all, bro, I don't know. You end up getting thrown right into another minigame, but it's a reskin of the one in Ariel's world where you know, help Sebastian guide his choir, Simon Says style, through repeating the right pattern back through, you know, controller inputs, blah blah blah. In this context, you're guiding the dwarfs as they work. You play 5 rounds of this game, and I guess that fixes that. I low-key don't know what they needed my help for, but okay. Now you're tasked with finding a minecart for them to load all of the gems onto, and you're supposed to help Happy and Grumpy get it up the hill. You have to give them a steady rhythm by alternating between each dwarf and pressing the A button when, you know, hovering your cursor over them respectively, without going too slow or too fast, which honestly is way easier than it sounds and is virtually impossible to mess up. Knock that out and you'll then head outside the mine where you'll help Doc and Dopey work together to gather the gems. Now, instead of revealing this next minigame to you, I want you to guess what format it's going to be in. Can you guess what we're going to play now? I'll give you a second. I'm patient. There, got it? Okay. Well, it's time to catch the falling objects by moving the basket side to side. And if you guessed literally anything else, that's how I know your ass wasn't paying attention. Look at the fucking screen, do better. But in this version of this tired minigame, your goal is to only catch the gems with the basket and avoid the rocks. Any gems you catch will fill up your progress bar, while any caught rocks will undo the progress. The physics of the objects rolling down the slope do make it a bit challenging, because some rocks might want to travel off and coincidentally knock themselves into your basket, even if you actively try to avoid them. But it's also not really inevitable. The game still feels pretty fair and it's not too difficult. And once you've made it past the 3 mini games based around helping the dwarfs work well together again, that's chapter 1. Yep, that's it. And before I move on to the next chapter, I'm getting it off my chest now. This subplot in Snow White's world, the one we just went over with the dwarfs, feels so out of place in the context of the game, and for one simple reason. The absence of the bogs? Hello? And don't get me wrong, I'm still a certified bog hater, but without them playing a role in what was essentially most of the chapter, the plotline feels so very low stakes and out of place within the context of this game. If this were any other like Disney princess related game, I wouldn't be as bothered, but at this point in the game, introducing some kind of problem that needs resolution while leaving the bogs completely out of it causes the gravity of this problem to fall flat in what is already like a game targeted towards younger players. It feels like, you know, some kind of filler content, and I'm trying to get back to the overarching plot and stop being overcritical like I swore I wasn't going to do. So let's move on to chapter 2. In this next chapter, Doc tells us that they've still been having trouble with their work in the mine and that they once again need your help. So the first thing you do is another gem sorting minigame. And before I blew up thinking it was going to be the exact same one I just played, I realized that they did change the format for this one, so they will live to see another day. But here you're going to help Dopey move the chute left and right to guide the correct gems into their matching colored minecart and sort them all properly. So like the last one, correctly sorted gems will add to the progress bar, and once you filled it up all the way, you and the dwarfs are set to head back to the cottage and update Snow White on your successful endeavors to help the dwarfs work together again. After starting your trek away from the mine, the bogs are back in the picture, which means I now have more opportunities to be spiteful again. There's also a new kind of bog you'll see in this world, which resembles a paintbrush, and the reason this one is scary is not related to their childbearing hips, but rather the status effect they can give you. They can slow down time like the clock bogs in Cinderella's world, albeit slightly less so, but instead of poisoning the surrounding environment with funk, will temporarily take all of the colors from the land, turning your screen black and white. Yeah, it's probably the scariest part of this game thus far. You'll run through the forest and back to the cottage and check in with Snow White to tell her the good news. She expresses relief, but proceeds to reveal something else that's gone wrong. The creatures of the forest had told her about the bogs stealing the colors of the forest and taking them over to the grove. Obviously, the time has come for you to check it out, so you leave the cottage, branching off to the right path of the forest in order to find your way there. And once you hit the grove, you get this cutscene showing these jolly ass bogs bogs, now distinguished by race, by the way, but not segregated. No, they're doing the exact kind of shit MLK would have wanted, living and laughing together, working in peace and harmony as they drain all of the color from the land. No, yeah, I'm sure that was in his speech somewhere, like, I swear it. Regardless, we gotta remember what we came for, so of course, you're prompted to use different colors of magic on their respective bogs of the same color. We will be ending more bloodlines tonight, starting with all of them, whichever comes first. Hold on. Because let me remind you real quick, in the beginning chapter, when we had to alternate colors for a task, we did that one color at a time. And here, we don't do that. You just gotta spam the motion controls, catch enough of a break to change colors when you need, and pray until it's all over. I know that's right. There are around 15 bogs total, several being paintbrush ones, and there's only one of you, so you have to log all the way in. I'm also realizing this is my first time ever getting to this point in the game because as a kid, I actually stopped in the middle of chapter 1 with the mind minigames. This is all completely new to me, and in a way, I'm glad, because if I had been faced with this challenge at the age of 6, somebody else would have been faced with the unavoidable consequences of my actions. And a Wii Remote shaped indent would have permanently left an imprint on my family room's back wall. That being said, a couple years were taken off my life by this challenge, but as always, I prevailed. Chapter 2, by the way. And once you survive that, Grumpy stomps his salty ass down to the grove with no clue what Snow White sent him there for. You assume it has something to do with restoring the colors and ask him if he remembers what colors belonged where. He stops to think and tells you what needs to be read, but has to ponder on the rest. So he tells you to focus on the red things and find him afterwards. That obviously doesn't take much to do, as we learned when we did it before, so he moves on to the green things for you to take care of, and then the blue after you've handled that. Once you're all finished, Snow White comes by to thank you. Grumpy seconds it, but nonchalantly as he would. And you're done with chapter 2. My god, I will never complain about tame, bogless filler plot points again. I am actively making it a point to shut my bitch ass up about that. I still think it was a valid criticism, but based on traumatic events, I will be pivoting my focus entirely. I don't want the smoke no more. Chapter 3 opened up, making me clutch my pearls just seconds in because Snow White starts off talking about some
Oh, thank goodness you're here. Something very sad has happened.
and this line felt like the same kind of shit you hear when certain people call you up to tell you somebody died. Like when I tell you I genuinely forgot what game I was playing for a second and like where I was. So I immediately saw like the flash of a mental image of like a dwarf procession before she finished talking, and it turns out the bogs didn't take the life of a dwarf, just the colors from the rainbow. Whew! Y'all, goddamn! I was about to say. We see a quick cutscene of the bog congregation at the scene of the crime, and after they've dispersed, you go up to talk to the dwarfs exactly where it had happened. They reiterate that all of the colors are missing. Grumpy makes a little quip to contribute to his daily hate quota, and Doc suggests that to restore the colors throughout the land, we must return them to the rainbow first. He also thinks that the bogs who stole the colors have scattered them all around, so our main task now is to find them and return them back here. Grumpy recounts seeing some red magic back in the mine, so that ends up becoming the first spot to check. And with that on your agenda, you head over there and see the red bogs in triangle formation, brewing up some evil red shit once you get inside. I wouldn't be surprised if this part looks suspiciously demonic to devout religious parents who like happen to watch their daughter playing this game at the worst possible point of it. I really could see it happening with something like this. Don't tell me you can't. Anywho, you can basically one-shot the 3 ones you see and twirl inside the circle to reclaim the red, no sweat involved. And Happy, who was sent by Snow White, comes around to let you know there's some blue magic found in the forest, so you leave the mine, run into some annoying ass bogs to murder once you're in the mountain area, and head to the right of the forest to find the same thing you just encountered, but in blue. See, as much as I could complain about how monotonous and repetitive this task could get, I now understand what happens when I start doing that. And I've since grown to become a better person. Love and light. Now with the green, Doc comes by to let you know that Dopey spotted it over in the grove, to which you respond,
I'm on my way.
and continue along the path. Reaching the grove, you're to do the same thing once more, but it was also the 3rd time of doing this task where I realized I could just technically run past them and twirl in the circle without having to defeat them first, so that was something. And after you've gotten all 3 colors back, Grumpy shows up reminding you to bring them back to the rainbow and essentially threatens violence in the case you don't. Oh, grumpy. Leaving the grove, you head through the forest and past the mountains towards the rainbow. As you head straight to it, all you have to do now is twirl underneath that rainbow and your wand will bring all the colors back. Just like that, chapter 3 in Snow White's story arc come to a close, and she thanks you for your help. The fact that I fought so hard to keep my life in order during chapter 2 had me anticipating worse in chapter 3, and whole time they gave me a break from all that, probably knowing that they had too much dip on their chip because they remembered who the target audience was again. But that's all over with, and I'm quite happy about that. So what's next? Well, saving Snow White's world grants you the final outer light on your pendant, but you can see here there's just one more left and it sits right in the center of it. In addition, the corresponding symbol lights up on the floor, and we then get a full overhead view of the room and all of its beautifully illuminated glory. It's all coming together, and bitch, hold on, what the bog doing? Out of nowhere, we get this very brief cutscene bringing attention to some bog running into the throne room as if he belongs there. And let me tell you now, I'm about ready to end this mess once and for all. The job ain't done until I never see one of those little bean-headed dookie sacks ever again. You hear me? But once you arrive on the scene, there's only one thing left in this room for you to do. Though the gate to Belle's world is now open to access, we're not doing that yet, since it's actually a bonus chapter. And when I reached this point and realized that previously I never actually made it far enough to see Belle's world unlocked, I almost got emotional because I knew it was time to make my inner child proud. Nevertheless, we had one more thing to handle ahead of it. Following that bog's path to the throne room behind us, just like that, we're greeted with this woman's ugly, loud-ass evil cackle as she sees your descent down the staircase all the way from the opposite side of the room. Considering she just announced her presence with whatever the fuck that was, you rightfully ask who she is, to which she responds,
I am Zara, and you must be the annoying little girl my bogs have told me about.
Bitch, I mean girl, who is you? And how you gonna call me annoying when you laugh like you're not allowed to at home and you're done up like your favorite holiday is Halloween for all the wrong reasons? And by the way, them bogs can't tell you shit else now, so count your blessings, read them, and weep them, ho. Hey, my fault. She just really pissed me off. I'm so sorry, y'all. And just listen.
How do you know about the bogs? Are you the one causing all this trouble?
This poor girl, y'all. I know you hear the frustration in her voice. You can literally tell this is probably the first time she's ever felt truly betrayed by an adult. This shit hurts, so bad. Now, Zara, girl, you gotta die. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules. And then she, and then she owns up to it, talk about some, I most certainly am. Someone hold me back. You ask her why she's doing this and is here as she now makes her descent down the staircase, and she reveals that she was born a princess yet refused to learn the values and virtues that came with it. So she was banished from her kingdom as a result, but soon after she discovered that she had special powers and essentially used them to ruin the worlds of other princesses, noting that the best part of it all was that she could stop any girl from becoming a princess, because if she can't be one, why should anyone else get the chance to be one? Huh? No, yeah, because yes, Zara, being so entitled that you essentially reject your own crown just to take away everyone else's privileges because you are somehow most deserving of that crown is a perfectly reasonable motive to act on. And if I too was a miserable bird bitch with nothing going for me whatsoever, then I would be justified in doing whatever I deem necessary to keep everybody on the ground with me, or a peg below me in hell. Does she know how she sounds? Nurse, she's out again! So she conveniently spawns in more bogs because, as we established, we cannot have shit nice. And what does she do? Command them to steal your voice? Because now that you know everything, why would she ever allow you the chance to speak out against it? And as you can see by the part of the cutscene I'm showing you, this pissed me off even more because we've been warding off and obliterating bogs this whole time. And you mean to tell me that 2 or 3 of these can just corner you, and with that same magic wand in your hand, you can't stop them right here? I don't care about the plot development here, because if you're gonna do something like this, at least make it make sense. god! Okay, so I needed to like step away and find my composure so I could just finish the story because this is getting highly personal as you can see and I'm far too invested now. But let's get back into it. They somehow steal your voice for Zara and now is the point where you get to YNO oopsie kill them all and free up the sound notes they just bummed off of you. Get all those notes back and your voice will return. It's not an onslaught of bogs or anything and it doesn't take long to get them all back, but Zara obviously throws a fit when her plan gets shat on. So she does the only thing she can do to have a chance against you. Order the box to freeze you and then steal your wand. This dirty, nasty, conniving... I have many colorful thoughts to share, but I am still actively working on the betterment of my spirit, so I will simply let this pass and forego my old habits of speaking outwardly about my disdain towards others whom I hold great contempt for. Once again, sending love and light. Homegirl essentially evaporates the wand with her dark magic, but your pixie guide hops into action with hopes to fix it. What even would this game be without one more basket catching game? I smell a favorite! This one is simple and most resembles the one in Ariel's world where you caught the orbs with the mer people's voices inside, except here, you're catching falling star fragments. And it's a noticeably faster pace with no introduction this time. Time's a wasted. And with the wand now rematerialized, the pixie sets you free and with no room for hesitation, it's time to go after every bog you see in this world. Don't think just slime. What'd I tell you? Why no oopsie kill them all? And now, even after that, Zara reheats some more of her own nachos and commands the bogs to steal the colors from this world. How fucking original. Who taught you that one? But yeah, color bogs make their return here, and obviously, you must do the very thing you did in most of Snow White's arc with the color changing mechanic. This is starting to feel like a midterm. And for some reason, when I played this part, they low-key just kind of stood there as if they were tired and just put up no fight whatsoever, as if it was just fate for them, which we all know it was. Clearly, fear-mongering works, and I truly recommend it. Get him out of here one last time, and now you've really peeved Zara, because despite her clearly being weak and not about it, she swears she'll handle you herself, and then immediately starts calling on the genie bogs to help her. Wimpy bitch. No way she needs all these assists to defeat a little girl. Like, is she really as powerful as she wants us to think? But anyways, it's implied by the pixie ahead of this next hurdle that you must defeat the genie bogs, who will continuously try and make mirages of Zara. And here, she also reminds you to use all of the skills you've learned so far, because if you pull this off, you'll finally get a chance to set everything right again. This is definitely a midterm. It's not just a feeling anymore. Once you're in it, the key here is to prioritize getting rid of the genies. You're going to spawn in with a bunch of Mirage Zaras surrounding you, but no matter how many you end up murking, the genies can spawn more, and none of it will matter within seconds. I immediately figured out that while I could ward the army of Zaras off with magic, which would stun them periodically whenever they got too close, I could also just make my way straight to the genie box and take out the source altogether. Saves a lot of time, and that's the final fight, for real this time. She weakly falls to the ground, whimpering, "It's over," and like the foolish but kind-hearted little girl you are, you extend your hand out and ask her to hold it. But wouldn't you know it, that's the final piece to restoring the abandoned castle and the land surrounding it. I mean, it's a Disney princess game after all. What did you expect? People begin to cheer and gather round, and we get to see a fireworks show in broad daylight. Hell yeah. But that's not all, princess. Yes, princess. You've made it this far, and it's time for you to take your proper place, because now you remember. Your clothing transforms. You now look the way you used to look. And you walk into the painting, sealing your legacy as the most noble princess in all the land, for all eternity. Roll credits. Holy shit. First of all, I really want to know how many people actually made it to the end from start to finish as kids, and I'm specifically talking about kids under the age of 8 at the time completing the game 100% with no help. Where are y'all now? How do you guys remember feeling about this game? And my most pertinent question is, how did you do it? Because at my big age, I can hardly fathom having half the motor skills I have right now and making it this far with no help. What did your parents feed you, bro? But anyways, we do have one more substantial piece of content to cover even after the game story has ended, and that would be Belle's world. Belle's is a single bonus chapter and is disconnected from the main storyline, and is more of a mini game with context than a full chapter chapter when compared to the other worlds, so it shouldn't take long to go over. After the credits have finished rolling, you do respawn in a no longer abandoned castle with a much more vibrant and cleaned up appearance that becomes apparent the more you run around, and you also spawn in with the gold version of your dress that was revealed in the ending cutscene, which was previously locked in the beginning if you remember. I went to the mirror to go check it out for myself while also changing back into my swaggy ass hat because y'all don't know shit about fashion. Make sure you spiffy and then head back to the castle's control room to go through Belle's portal. When you get there, you show up to a pretty empty ballroom with Belle visibly standing in the center of it and Lumiere nearby her, when out of nowhere, 3 bogs appear and surround them both from a distance. Quick reminder that since this is a bonus chapter and disconnected from the main storyline, we unfortunately gotta beat on some bogs one more time, but know that it holds no weight on anything outside of this world. The main game is done. No more. We're done. That being said, you then hear Belle ask Lumiere what those creatures are and if they were a part of the castle's enchantment along with everything else. Obviously, Lumiere doesn't recognize them and wrongfully assumes they're harmless. He's actually more concerned about what the master, aka the beast, might do if he sees them. Oh brother. Respectfully, he don't know shit about what these booger bags have been up to this whole time you've been running around here, cleaning up their mess and spraying Glade over their residual cheek win. Belle insists that they can make him disappear before he finds out and subsequently notices you standing off to the side, greeting you with no hesitation. She introduces herself in Lumiere and you mention how you overheard them talking about the bogs, which obviously piques their interest. You then explain to them how much trouble they've been causing and claim you might know how to make them go away once and for all. Lumiere seems pleased with you and is beyond grateful for your willingness to help. The pixie then steps in to clue you in, saying she thinks the bogs want to play a game of tag. Okay, I guess, bro. But if you can stay away from their magic and avoid becoming it until the progress bar is full, you'll win the game. If they tag you, however, your progress bar will continuously go down as long as you're it. And if it goes back to empty, you'll have to start the whole thing over again. But you also have the ability to use your magic to retaliate and tag them back in order to stop losing progress and begin gaining some again. I honestly thought that after all I had been put through with the last couple of worlds and the ending, this would be way harder than it sounded when it was initially explained to me. It wasn't. It actually wasn't hard for me at all. Most of it is literally running from them, and if you divert them from the jump, you have a significant enough speed advantage over them to easily outrun them without getting tagged once. I assume it was because I have long normal legs and theirs are the size of 2 Office Depot thumbtacks with the double-sized beige banana split 7s on them. Slim, where the hell they get these at? It's no challenge to throw them off your trail, and once you beat them in their own game, they quite literally cease to exist. All of them. It's literally mentioned offhand in one line that the bogs are butterflies again. You know how I interpret that? They're finally extinct! Yes! Yes! We're free! Belle thanks you, and instead of sending you off and simply saying you're welcome to return like the others did, invites you to stay and visit for a while. You know? Be their guest. You know? Yeah, you do, you know. But you actually turn them down for the moment, promising to come back and visit when you finally get the chance. And with that, you're sent off on your way. Though I'd like to very quickly bring up a couple of things here before I close out. First thing, remember, we've basically promised to every princess that we will return to visit, but obviously, we can see the game is over. We never get to revisit the princesses after the story ends. I figured it might be more of a thing they leave up to imagination, since it's very much theoretically possible with all the portals and things not like disappearing or disabling themselves beyond the initial story ending. You just cannot go back and visit the worlds outside of you playing through the given chapters, at least from what I know and understand. And I say that with a great degree of uncertainty because the second thing, my game crashed, and it did it immediately after I finished the bonus chapter. I replayed it twice afterwards, thinking it was an unlucky blip and just wiping the disc down to fix it, but it kept crashing at the same point every single time. The childhood scratches on the disc finally caught up to me and completely stopped my grind. I also initially thought that I could just restart the game and respawn in the castle due to the autosave feature, but the autosave file kept launching me back into the beginning of Belle's bonus chapter, and it was so dumb, bro. That save was just gonna be stuck there in that loop forever. But you know what? It doesn't matter! We finished the game, and the only other thing left to see was the secrets menu option from the beginning, which led you to a cheat code menu where you could input different codes to do things like unlock Belle's gate prematurely, go straight into the final battle with Zara, or even change your wand shape, which I tried by typing in a code I found listed on an online forum. When I respawned in my Belle Purgatory save, I was able to see that my wand now emitted these star-shaped particles, which was a cool little Easter egg in my opinion. But beyond even that, the game is complete, and I'm beyond grateful that it waited up to that point in the save to hiccup or crash, as opposed to earlier. I'm also grateful I got to record everything, bruh. I'm counting my blessings! And also, did you forget? Or did you think I forgot? We're not getting off that easy. See, they don't really spell out the details of it, not even at the end of the story either, but yes, the little girl had amnesia up until she restored peace to the land once and for all, and we can now piece the story all together. She was the princess in question this whole time, and this castle was her home, and we now know that Zara was the one to cast that evil curse upon the castle, the reason the girl had lost her memory in the first place. It was really a fateful journey, and in a rather symbolic way, you can see her helping out the other princesses in their worlds, assisting the friends, townspeople, and creatures within them, as well as standing up for her very own core values and virtues to the very end, even when facing Zara, who was the antithesis of her in pretty much every single way, as the ultimate key back to the life she had been living before she lost it all in the first place. Her pure heart and resilience broke the spell, and that special girl who had to go on the Enchanted Journey to save the land from this curse, being the same girl who essentially needed the saving, makes this story's direction so much deeper than any of us could have ever realized back then. This is phenomenal storytelling. But enough of that. The story is over. And while many of us never actually got to see the ending as kids, unless we were, seeking out gameplay videos or guides online, so many of us are united by having experienced this game at all. I feel like I've met so many people who remember this game, but I was shocked and appalled to see how little it had been talked about in a format like this, so I made it a point to revive my YouTube presence to bring it to fruition, because clearly no one else was doing it, and I saw a chance to give this game and its developers their flowers. So here we are. I was able to get a lot out of this game, including nostalgic moments from early childhood that permeate my brain to this day, and now fresh new memories from adulthood of not only catching on to its overarching story and the subtle themes that line it from the inside, but experiencing it from beginning to end, and that's something worth celebrating. To the people who were on the development teams at Papaya Studio and Disney Interactive, Stephen Jarrett, the director of game design, the producers, designers, artists, programmers, the composer of the soundtrack, and anyone else involved with the making of this game, thank you for everything. And to anyone who has the means to replay this game right now with an even greater appreciation for its heart and artistry, you know what you have to do. I'm serious, if you don't have an excuse, you don't have an excuse. You have a week to find the time to boot up a save and play it at least once. And your homework is to knock out at least one Princess's World. The game as a whole isn't even that long. I know you can handle that. Turn it in at 11:99 p.m., no extensions. Period. Enjoy yourself!